Welcome, friends. We are continuing forward. It is week 13. It's not March 4th, it's March 6th. Week 13, and we're doing our algo. As a reminder, as always, you've got your discussion questions and some core assignments or core assignment. What I want to talk about today, we're going to reiterate form security, login and registration, and then we're going to do this algo right here where we're going to reverse a list of numbers in place. In place means that you can't create a new list. So there's some tricks to do this. So I wanted to make sure that we're practicing and doing that. Okay. So really just want to jump in to this. You guys can see my screen, correct?
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. We did quite a bit of stuff. If we go to my user, we did just a couple things. We added this additional validation. Again, this is for confirm password. And so what we did was created another one. Actually, let me just get this up and running, and then we can get going. Does anybody have any questions? Like anything that really I could, before I just kind of go through this as a generic thing, is there anything that people were working with that just didn't really sit right with them? Has this made sense? Have you guys kind of picked this up a little bit?
I think I'm starting to understand it little by little, but
Mm-hmm.
it's something like I really feel like I need a lot more practice on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
So
okay. Oops. Yeah, and it's something that with practice it'll be a little bit easier. Just as a reminder, you can bring in a working login and registration. So everything I'm going to go through today, you can bring that working, and that's a-okay. There's no qualms with that. Okay, so this is what we have. This is what we created on Monday. Just a simple login and registration where we can register or log in. Just to kind of show this, let's see. I log in and we're here. Had that not worked, it would have redirected us and said, invalid login or email. One thing I did kind of want to point out is we have this email validator, which isn't really super necessary, to be honest, because we don't really need to validate if their values are, good to go, because we're going to then check to see if we, if we even have that. And so if we don't have it or it's a bad email, it's already going to not work. So this is something that we could do just to kind of prevent us from pinging the database. But it's not super necessary. Like this isn't super necessary because we're going to check the password that they give versus the other one. I guess email would be fine because if it's not a good email, then that's fine. But the password length, we don't necessarily need to do. The other thing that you typically do with a login is right here, we say, hey, invalid email or password must be at least 8 characters. We also, if there's any sort of issue, so let's say that the email, either we didn't have that email or the passwords don't match, we never want to say the password doesn't match the email. We always want to say invalid email or password, because we want to make sure that users or nefarious actors, not users, sorry, don't say, okay, I got the right email, I just need to now crack my password, right? Or I just need to do a bunch of different requests on a password. So we want to make sure that we keep it as ambiguous as it's either email or password. So if you've ever logged in anything and it didn't work, it should always say invalid email or password, just so that way we're not letting anybody know, okay, hey, we got the password, but invalid login. I did see a really funny setup that it said, I don't know if it was a joke or not, but somebody was trying to log in and they say, nope, that's not your password. This password you entered belongs to so-and-so. As like a preventative, like that's not your password, that's Ricky's. And so then all of a sudden, if you have that, then you have his password or their password. So it's kind of funny. But yeah, we did add this validation because we see that we've got, if I were to go back, we now have this confirm password field, but just as a reminder, we do not need confirm password here. That's not something we need to store in our database. We don't need to double store our password. What we're doing is we are just checking to say, hey, are these the same? Is what was passed in password the same as my confirm password? And if it isn't, then we're going to say, hey, passwords don't match. That's fine. If it is, then we're good to go. Great. If all of these pass, if all of these pass and it returns valid, we're good to go. If I go to my users, and let's say I'm registering, first off, we're checking, are they a valid user? Or sorry, is it valid? Or is whatever we just passed in, did we get true or false? If it's false, it redirects us back. If it's true, then what we do is we go and try to get by email. And what this is doing is if somebody's trying to register with the same email as somebody we already have in our database, maybe they've already got one account. What we're doing is we're saying, hey, let's get this user by email. And if user means we get something back here, then we give them a message that says email already in use, please log in, and then we redirect. Right. So we don't want to save that information. We make sure we do that before our save method. But it's just another way that if somebody's trying to register, it's like, nope, already have that. Please do something else. Let's say that it gets past this as well. That means we don't have this email and it's valid data. Something we introduced was bcrypt, and that is another thing that you will bring in. So it's another package that we can utilize. And what this does is it hashes our passwords. The way it does it is it runs a method called generate password hash. Now, we don't know how this works, but really, if anybody remembers what a hash is really a long string that when broken down from bcrypt's perspective, it equals whatever our password is, right? And it's ways that it can keep track of that. We will never store a password in plain text. So that's something we want to make sure that we don't ever do. We passed that. And the reason we have been I've been harping to break out your data. I've seen a couple of you guys that just immediately pass in request.form. The reason I've been harping to press out data is because now when we are hashing a password, this is necessary and you have to do that because there's no way to pass in your password hash without it. Right? Because if I do just request.form, then we're going to start saving our data and our passwords, we're going to be saving them in plain text, and that's something we don't want to do. We want to save them as a hash. So that's why we break out this data. So that way we can have this field right here. That's our password hash. Then we send it to our user.save, which is just our creation, our insert. And then it has all of my information and saves that. Just as a reminder, and we can find this here in my config file, when I've got an insert, so any sort of creation, it returns the ID number of the row inserted. So whenever we're creating something, this value returns that ID of what we just created. And so what we use that with, because we're clever, is we can say, hey, user ID equals this insert method, right? This user.save pass in data, because we know that this call is going to give us back the ID we just created. And then I can throw that ID in session. So now I know who is logged in. I'm going to pause there. Are there any questions or things I can clarify for this?
Hey, well, I had a question on um, just when to know when to use uppercase or not. I noticed like you have post in all caps, and I've seen in other examples like the first sequence will be all lowercase, and then the next sequence will start with a capital letter. Like, is there a resource I can find like when capitalization matters?
Great question. So I have posts in all caps just because that is kind of standardized. If you do it in all like lowercase, it doesn't actually matter. The only times that you can really think about, hey, this is really important if I, just kind of knowing what data you're dealing with. It's really important if you're dealing with a class instance, those are capitalized. So when I'm dealing with user here,
Okay.
that is a user instance of my class, or that's my user class, which is coming from right here. Oh, sorry, right here. Classes are capitalized. Methods are always all lowercase. And so here, when I'm calling like user.getAll, I'm saying, hey, I want to use the getAll method within my user class. And then my variables, again, my variables are typically lowercase. So you can always default to lowercase. The only time that really you want to use capital, just one capital letter, is when you're referring to a class. And then again, for methods post or even your, because I believe even your query, I think this would still work if you had these as lowercase, but it is standard SQL language to have them in all caps. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Hey, Chris, I see that you have a question or hand raised.
Yes, I was wondering about the password. You mentioned something about not storing it in plain text.
Mhm.
Is that all the way from the beginning when we built the query in the database, the
Yeah,
MySQL?
great question. At the beginning, what we were doing
Right,
is we were either passing, I've always kind of created this data dictionary, but we used to, before we learned about hashing, we used to just
right.
say request.form password, just like this. And so this is plain text, meaning it's taking exactly what was typed, the value or the input. So if I said password, it's going to take password and it's going to put it in my database. Let me even open up my, my SQL database and my workbench, and I'll show you exactly what I mean.
Okay.
So that's called being plain text. The real issue and kind of what we talked about on Monday is if somebody ever hacks into my database, then they can, what do we call this? Belt exam DB.
You could use your password, find it out.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a whole bunch of, okay, there's a whole bunch of hackers that if they hack a database, right here, here's all the passwords that I saved before we hashed, right? And so let's say that somehow my database gets compromised. There's a million ways a database can get compromised. This is the data they might get. And if it's in plain text, well, then what they will do is they will take this email and this password, because unfortunately, most people just kind of have one password.
Mhm.
What they'll do is they'll go and then try that at wellsfargo.com and bankofamerica.com and all the banks and all the financial things to see, can I get into your bank? And then I'll take your money, right? Or whatever. And so what we do is we do what we call a hash. So this is the same. One thing to kind of note, these two are the same. They're the same passwords that I created. But when I run it through bcrypt, this is what it gives me. This whole string right here that you can see goes all the way to the WYE. Bcrypt hashes it. And so let's say our database does get hacked or leaked or something like that. Well, this is what they're getting. And it's really hard for them. And it takes a lot of computational power for them to try to crack this, like years kind of computational power. And so that's why we hash a
Okay.
password. And so, worst case scenario, my email gets lacked or is leaked. Sorry, not lacked. My email, my name gets leaked, but at least my password is good. And they will do the same thing with, like, if you had a social security number that's encrypted and hashed. That way, if that gets leaked, that's not, just something, because on the dark web, they will sell that for tons of money.
So when we create the password in the form for the name, do we put, I mean, not for the name, for in the actual form in the HTML, do we
Mhm.
also put type under the type? Do we put password or text?
So password, all that's going to do. So like if I'm saying user form,
Yeah,
all
for
password's
the
going to do is whenever I go here and I type like It's just gonna give me those dots. That's it.
Oh, okay.
That's all a password
Okay.
does, is it gives you those dots to where if I inspect, I come
So
here.
it doesn't matter if I put name, text or password, it's just, that's the only difference.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the
Type
only
for the
difference.
type.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not doing anything. So
It
like if I
doesn't have
just
any,
change it to text, no, it doesn't have any encryption or anything. All it does is those dots.
okay, it doesn't have anything to do with the encryption part, right?
No, it's
Okay.
just those dots. Now,
Oh,
you should
okay.
absolutely put it to oops. You should absolutely put it to password because it's really poor practice to keep that as a text field.
Okay.
But that's all it's doing. Yeah, the encryption that we're doing and is whenever we run it through this, so we say password hash is bcrypt, which is what we bring in, generate password hash. We're saying, hey, I want you to hash this password. And then we give it the request.form password. So we give it the whatever my user typed into my form, and that generates my hash. And that's why we have to do this data, because when I'm passing it to my save, right? When I'm passing it
Mhm.
here, let me go to save, sorry. And I'm passing it here, and it's going to inevitably add in my password. I want it to take my hashed password. Again, if I would have put request.form password here, it's going to, even though I hashed it, I'm not referring to that hash. I'm referring to the original plain text password.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. So that's why we put PW
So
hash. So
that
now,
so then from here, we would use this password hash that was created. We would use it in the validate login.
nope, we've already run validator, right? We've already checked and made sure, does my password match? Because we want to make sure we validate first. Because what we did is we did some regex, which is regular expression, right? To basically say, does my password have lowercase, uppercase, and some number? Is what it, and this is the number portion. So it's got to have a lowercase, uppercase, and a number. If
Oh.
I passed in my hash, as we can see, like if I hashed it
Mhm.
first, this is going to meet all of that criteria. But I can even put in a 4-letter password and it's still going to be quite a long string. And so we want to make sure we check, is our password good first, and then we hash it.
Would
If
we
that makes
use this? Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, but I'm talking about the validate login now. Do we
Mhm.
use this information that we just got the password hash? Do we use that in the static
Login.
method for the
Uh,
validate login?
not the
Uh,
static method. Again, I was kind of saying at the beginning of class, I don't think you were quite here. Is
I
that
was
this isn't
sorry.
really super necessary. The only thing it does is it prevents us from even querying our database. But you raise a great point. When we go to the login, let me find login. Oh, login's right here. We're going to run this again. Again, this is kind of just to prevent us from querying my database. If it works and it's a valid email and the password matches our criteria, then
Uh-huh.
we take the email and then we pass that into my get by email, because I need to get my user that has that email, right? And so I've got this method called get by email. Let me find it. Get my email. So I'm selecting all from users where email equals the email I just passed through.
Mm-hmm.
Put this side by side. And then what we're doing is we're saying, if not user, meaning, hey, if I didn't get anything back, then what does that tell me? If I run this query, select all where the ID matches that email, but I don't get anything back, what does that tell me? And really, what does my method say?
Return false.
Yeah, right. So if that tells me I don't have that email in my database. So what this is saying is, okay, we run my get by email. We're saying if not user, this is another way of saying if I get false, because remember when we're calling this method, its value is whatever is returned. And so in this case, if I didn't have that email, user is going to equal false. So I say if not user, meaning if it's false, then redirect back. Because I don't have that, right? And here I could have like a flash message that says invalid login or email or password. If I get past this point, meaning that I did get a user back, right here. Then what I do is I again, and I think this is where your question is coming from. I then use bcrypt dot check password hash. Again, we don't do anything with the hash. We don't understand how it works. We have bcrypt do that for us. I pass in the user password. User password here is coming from my user instance that I received back, right? We're assuming on line 38 that since we got there, because it did not hit this. Remember, if a function ever hits a return, it immediately is done running. So if we didn't get a user back when we requested their email, it would automatically send us back to the normal page. If we get to line 38, that tells us we did get something back. And we're calling that something user. And so what we're saying is, hey, bcrypt, can you check the password hash of the user that I just got back, the password associated to that, and the password that I got from my form? And what it's going to give me back is either true or false. Right? So if it's false, meaning that they do not match, this password does not match that password, it's going to redirect me back. And again, this is where I would have a flash message that says email or password are incorrect. If it does, if this is true, so we're saying, hey, you know what, it's good. Then what we do is we put that user. So we have a user, we know that their email works. We know that we got that user back. We check their password, it matches. Cool, let's grab their ID and let's put it in session so I know who's logged in. And as we navigate throughout the website, we can tell who's logged in. And then we redirect them back to dashboard. So bcrypt is the one who is handling checking the hashed password in our database with the new password. And what it actually will do is either it will run the same encryption on this, right? And then say, okay, now do these two strings match? If I put in a new password, it's going to grab this and it's going to encrypt it in the same way. And it's going to say, are these the two the same? And if they're different, it's going to say, nope, they're not the same. Does that make sense? Or anything I can kind of clear up?
It makes a lot of sense. Yes, thank you.
Cool. Yeah, my pleasure. Anybody have any questions on login? Okay. And the last thing is we just have log out. So this would just be a button, right? Question, if I had a button here that said, or here somewhere, so let's go to my dashboard. And I just have a button for log out. Let's see. Oh, users. Oh, I don't even have a dashboard. Okay, let's just do this. Oh, we said that index.html is going to be my dashboard, right? Yeah, we did. That's why we didn't have that. Delete. Yeah. Let's say I had a button for logout, right? Let's say I have div. Oh, let's put it in. Just gonna have a button. It's gonna say logout. Or I'm gonna actually have an A tag, sorry. With an href. of slash logout. It just says logout. If somebody clicks this, what kind of method is that? What HTTP method is going to be this request here? Kind of talked about this on Monday. What kind of HTTP method is that going to be?
Then a redirect.
It's a redirect, but we've got just a couple methods, HTTP methods. Can anybody remember what those are?
Get and
Request.
post.
Yeah, get and post, right? You have get, post, patch, put, and delete are really kind of the big ones. But this is just a get request, right? I'm not giving any sort of information. And so the only time that we're going to say methods is post is when I'm giving some information from a form, right? Had I put this button in a form, then it would be, right? But because I had an aref, all it is an HTTP method, and methods by default is get. So it's just a get request. I want to go here. And then what does it do? It runs this method. It clears my session. So it clears that ID in there. And then it redirects me back home. So that's how I would log out.
Do you have to put method get?
You don't. So think of like a default parameter, right? To where I could say, if I've got, so let me take this off. If I've got something like def, some function that takes in a list, and if it doesn't give me a value, right? Let's say I don't pass it in, you say 1, 2, 3. And let's say I just print list. Cool. Remember, if I say some function and I call this, right? What's going to happen here?
Gonna print 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, because I put a default parameter. But if I said something like this, what's it going to print? What would it print here? If I ran this.
Would it print 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6?
No. So when we
4, 5, 6.
have 4, 5, 6, exactly. When we do something like this, this is what we call a default parameter. What that means is we have this parameter that this function accepts. If I don't give it anything, so for example, if I just say some function, it's saying, hey, I don't want it to break, right? Because if I had it just like this, and I call some function, I've got an error, right? Because, hey, in order for this to work, I need some value to give me. I need you to be able to print a list. And so what people have done, instead of everything breaking, they said, okay, well, people can pass stuff or they don't have to. If they don't do it, so if I just call it like this, and no value is passed in for list, I want you to default to this. Fall back and just print 1, 2, 3, or just do whatever, right? But if somebody does pass in a value for list, just like this value overtakes whatever this value is. This value is just a fallback in case nobody passed anything. But if somebody does pass it, or whoever calls it, or whatever calls that method or that function, if it does pass a value, that supersedes, that takes priority over this sort of default value. Does it make sense?
Got it. So the new entered value takes precedence and overwrites the default.
Exactly. And so when we're dealing with functions, and so where this comes into play is here, we could not pass in methods, right? See how we have an app route, we don't pass in methods here, but here we do. By default, methods equals get. Right? So I don't even have to pass in methods because if I don't pass it in, like here, then it's just going to say, it must just be a get request. If I want it to be something different though, I give it the value I want it to be different. In this case, I say, hey, I actually want this to be a post request, not a get request. It goes, okay, great.
Got
Does that
it.
make sense?
So get is the default.
Yeah,
method.
get usually with like most languages, if not all languages, get is always the default. You're kind of dealing with these HTTP methods.
Got it.
You
Okay,
could put
cool.
this
Thank you.
here and this would be just fine. It would be the same as if I
But
called.
it's just a little redundant.
Yeah, it'd be the same if I did something like this. Yep. It's the same exact thing, right? I can pass in 1, 2, 3, but if I don't pass in anything, it already is going to give me 1, 2, 3. So
Yeah.
like you said, it's just redundant, just as saying the same thing. And so that's why we don't pass in a method's get.
Okay,
Hey,
Yeah.
Will,
that makes more sense actually.
Yeah.
Will, can you show us what that logout looks like as
Yeah, of course.
a href and h tag instead of a button?
Yeah. Let's go here and let's log in. Just like that. And so if I log out, it takes me back.
Okay, so it's like a hyperlink instead of a button. Okay.
Yeah, you could have a button if you wanted. I think you could technically, I don't think it's good practice. Can you nest a button in an A tag? I don't think it's good practice if you do that. I think for, yeah, in general, you should not nest one. Because I think it has to do with accessibility. So a lot of readers, so people who maybe are visually impaired, they will use, there's lots of cool technology out there they read basically what's on the website. So that way people who are visually impaired can navigate the web. And so that's why it's important to understand accessibility when we're dealing with HTML, because if the reader gets confused, then it kind of prevents users who need that accessibility to from reading that or interacting well, so it doesn't create an equitable experience for everybody. Does that make sense? And that's in like HTML5 would be is kind of the new thing. There's a whole bunch with accessibility in HTML that you can jump into, but yeah. Yeah, you just have an A, like on your exam, you can do an A tag or you can do a button. Doesn't really matter.
All right, thanks.
I'm not, and I wouldn't count you off if you did a button inside of an A tag. Like if the functionality works, what I care about is, do you have a full stack application? Because the reality is, but I might comment like, hey, maybe let's not put an A tag in a button or put a button in an A tag kind of thing. Not great, but again, functionality is what I care about. Are there any other questions on this? We've got 20 minutes. I think we could probably knock this out in 20 minutes. But we don't, obviously this and you guys understanding our entire project absolutely takes precedence. So are there any other questions on what we did here? With our login, our logout, and our register. Fun little fact, if your page is getting too long too, you can just do this. And it makes it much easier to kind of navigate.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
cool.
so then you're like, okay, which one am I trying to go to? I want to work on user form. Cool, let me pin that out. Or I want to work on logout. You do that. And it's not so like, what is it? So pretty nice. Any other questions on this? And Chris, I don't know if you were able to watch Mondays, but with bcrypt, we do have to install it. So we would say pip env install flask bcrypt, and that's on the platform. And then whenever we do that, wherever we want to use it, so we import it, wherever we want to use it, we say bcrypt equals bcrypt app. So that way we have the encryption abilities, and then we can refer to it as bcrypt. If this was unicorn on the left, we would say unicorn.generate hash. Keep it as bcrypt, but just want to say this is just a variable here on the left. What's on the right is what matters.
All right, thank you. I was
Yeah.
wondering where it went, if it was in the models or in the controllers, the
Yeah.
import. That's always a little confusing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's wherever we want to use the actual bcrypt itself. And so that's when we have it in our, register, that's where we're actually calling bcrypt. Again, if I were to say unicorn equals bcrypt app, here I would say unicorn.generate password hash. And I say unicorn always because I just feel like it's outlandish. Just to really reiterate, it could be anything you want. So. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, in register, whenever I put like user equals to user dot get by email, it shows error like bool, and yeah, and if user the two part, whenever I put it, it shows error.
So I would have to look at your code, and I'm happy to do that after class. Don't want to take up class time for that. But I would assume based off the error, it could either be that the get by email is incorrect. And that, or maybe I would check. What I would do is I would say, first off, I would kind of comment or stop all this other stuff, and I would just print user and see, well, what am I getting back? What is user being, what is that? And if I'm not getting anything back, then I would say, okay, I'm getting an error. That must mean that this is incorrect. Either I'm not passing in information, so I would check and say, hey, am I getting, in my form, did I call it email? That'd be the first place I checked. So I'd go, to my user form, and I'd be like, oh, yep, nope, I called it email. Okay, so I can kind of cross that out. Then I would say, am I importing user, which I'm assuming you are? Yep, I am. Okay, so then it must be something here. And then I would go to my actual user model and then go to my get by email. And then I would kind of like what we did in office hour. So, okay, here's my query results. I would probably print results. What am I getting back? And then if I'm getting everything back, then I'd break it down and say, okay, results is greater than what, so then I would kind of just break down that way. Remember thinking, what is your computer doing? Right here, it's running this validate user. If it gets to this line, that means that the values were validated. Cool. And then saying, okay. And I think that this is a good thing I can talk about instead of doing the algo. Really practicing what is happening with your computer or how your computer is thinking and what it's doing is going to save you so much time when you are problem solving, because you will run into a bug. The best developers in the world write bugs. Like, that is a very normal thing. But being able to debug is a huge, huge, huge thing. And so remembering that what we're doing basically is, let me get my little annotate tool, is I've got three different things that are communicating. I first have my front end. I've got my back end. And then I've got my database. Right? I don't like that. I got my database here. So I kind of want to walk through. Let me write this here. And I'm going to need some help. So I'm going to need your guys' help. I think this is going to help you for your exam. Okay. When I am, oops. When I'm here, just don't worry about this right now. And I fill out this form. So I'm really on my index.html and I'm on my user form and I press submit. What is happening? And I fill out my form and I press submit. What is my computer doing? I'm on my front end. I filled out my form. What is it then doing?
Just going on a user.create.
Yeah. So that's creating what? What is that called? My front end is making,
Route.
there's just not a route.
It's a post request.
It's a request, right? Exactly. It is just a request. And yes, you're exactly right, Gregory. In this case, the method in which it's requesting is post, right? So I'm going to say request. So it's making some sort of request. Now, what it's going to do is it's going to go to my, it's going to go to my controller. And what's it going to look for in my controller? So I'm going to go here. What's it looking for?
Is it looking for validators?
It's not looking for validators. We're making a request. What's it going to look for? What specifically in my controller is it looking for?
It exists.
Users that exist.
Not users that exist yet. Let's think about it kind of an elementary request response cycle. The computer, I'm in my user form and I press the button and it makes a request to here, right? To this specific route. So it goes into my controller and it says, hey, are you user/create? Nope. Are you user/create? Nope. Are you user/create? Nope. And it keeps going until, where's my user/create? How embarrassing. Did I miss it? Wait a second. User/create. And then my users. I have user. What is happening?
Well, I meant to ask
Oh.
you.
Go ahead.
You see where it says users.py and that number next to it on the far side is number 2. What do those numbers mean?
I think it's that I've got a problem in the file, but it typically is because I don't have an environment. So yeah, it would be that I've got a problem. It's just your linter. So what that says is like, hey, you're calling in Flask and Flask bcrypt, but I don't know what that is because you can activate an environment on VS Code. But we've done it in our terminal, not in the environment. You can go down here and activate an environment, and then it knows what you're doing. But that's all it is. It's just a linter. Also, I misspoke. We're not using user form anymore. We're using log reg. So sorry about that. So we've got this person, or this is my form, and it's making an HTTP request to /register. Cool. Sorry about that. It's going to register. So it's going to go here and say, are you registered? Nope. Are you registered? Nope. Are you registered? Nope. Are you registered? Nope. Are you? Are you? And it finally finds it. And so then it says, okay, register. I've got a request for you and I've got some data. Right? That as part of my request, I have this .form section. And so it says, okay, great. What do you want me to do? So now my backend starts handling it, right? And the first thing it does, so we run this method, the first thing it does is it says, hey, if not user validate user, what that's saying is I need you to run this and get some value, right? Because when we call a function, it runs it. So where is this going to go? Where's my computer going to go to get this function or method?
To your
HTML.
static method,
I'm sorry.
your models.
Yeah, it's going to go exactly. So then we're going to go from there to my model. So I'm going to try to make it as small as I can. It's going to go to my model. And it's going to say, hey, I need to run validate user. So it's going to come here. And it's going to go, okay, great. Where's validate user? You validate user, you validate user. It's going to go all the way until it finds validate user. It says, okay, great. I have this information that we gave it, right? We gave it this form. So I have this information. Validate user says, yep, I need that. I'm going to call it data, but thanks for giving me the information. And then it does all of this, right? It creates a new variable called isValid. Then it does a bunch of conditions. And so once it's done doing all this, it says, here you go. Here you go, controller. So it gives the controller, I'm gonna make this green, back a value, right? So the controller says, great. And it checks that immediately. It gives back the value and it says, great. If that's false, if the value you gave me is false, I want to redirect back to here, which would then take us to our index, which is going to be our log reg. And if it was false, it's going to then, I'll make that red because it's false. It's going to send us back, right? It's going to send it back to the front end, say, hey, I'm just going to send you back to my login and reg. If it's true, if everything's good to go, then we come here to the line 52. And what's it doing again? What's line
Question.
Back to the
52?
controllers. Back to the models.
Back to my model, right?
Yeah. To your get
Now-
by email.
To get by email, right? So it's going to go and it's going to find get by email. Let me make these a little bit smaller so it's a little bit easier. It's going to look through all these. And it's going to find get by email. It's going to create this variable. Then it says results equals connect to MySQL. Okay. Well, we brought in connect to MySQL. Where did we bring that in from? Where did we get this connect to MySQL value?
Or you call it out the exam DB right there. The
Sure, but where is connect to MySQL? Where's that coming from?
oh,
the
your
config.
import at the top.
Database at the top.
Oh,
Yeah, which is
from your
coming
database.
from my
Your
config
config?
file, right? Yeah, so then I've got my SQL connect. I'm just gonna say connect because it's enough room, but it's the whole page, right? So when we see this connect to MySQL, it then navigates there, right? And then it goes to my connect to MySQL, and it says, hey, I'm going to give you my database, the database I want you to deal with. And then secondly, once you do this, once that's done, this is what we call the chain method. Once this is complete, then I want you to run this. So stay there and then run this. We have belt DB, we give it my query, and we give it the data. Remember, the data is coming from my model. Or the data is coming from here, right? So it's taking this. Then it is going here, this data. So it has my email. So it's giving the query and the email that it needs to refer to. So what my computer then does is it goes to MySQL connection. It first goes to the very bottom, connect to MySQL DB, remember, because I gave it my DB that I want to deal with. And it says, okay, return MySQL connection DB. Now this is an instance of this. So what do we know has to happen? It comes up and says, okay, MySQL connection. It runs my constructor that takes in self and a DB, which is my belt exam DB, establishes this variable, runs all this. Once that's done running, cool, this is done running. Then we query DB on that value. So on that database, right? So basically this is connecting to my database and then saying, cool, once we've connected to my database, let's run this query. So then it runs the query that we gave it, this select all from where email is. And if we look, oops, sorry, wrong file. When we see select and it's greater or equal to 0, it will return the data from the database in a list of dictionaries, right? So we know we're going to be getting a list back when we're dealing with that, and it returns the result. So whatever my database gives me. So when we get this return result, what it's doing is it's saying, okay, now I'm done with this file. Let's return my result back to my model. Oops. Then my model saying, okay, great. That result that you were just returned, let's make a variable called results and set it equal to that. They're going to check and say, hey, if the length of this, of whatever list of dictionaries you just gave me back, if it's less than 1, meaning there's nothing in there, then let's give it false. So if it's less than 1, it goes back to my controller. And here, user is going to equal false. If it is, if it's not less than 1, meaning there's a value in there, it's going to give the class instance of the result. There should only be 1. So that's why we can say result of 0. So either way, then my model gives back a value, which is either false or it is the actual instance of that user or that, that user, right? By that email. So then my controller goes, okay, great. I've got a value, which is again, either false or it's an actual value. And it says if user, meaning that I have something, it's not false. Then in my register saying, if I have something back, then it's saying, we know that there's something already in my database, right? So I'm going to create a flash message of email, and then I'm going to redirect back to the front end, or I'm going to redirect to my index, which then goes to my front end. So it sends it back. If there's not a user, meaning that we don't have anything in my database, it says, okay, great. Let's create this new variable called bcrypt, and then we're going to run the generate password hash method, and we're going to give it my password. Awesome. One thing I forgot to mention, I'm so sorry, is when we run this connect to MySQL, what we're doing is we are making a connection, and this is really important, so I'm sorry I missed it. When we say connect to MySQL, we're then making a connection to my database, right? We're connecting and we're making the query, and my database is going to give me back a list that's either going to be empty, meaning we don't have any values, there's no users by that email, or it's gonna give me that one, the one user, which then MySQL Connect says, okay, great. I'm gonna return that. I'm gonna return the result that my database gives me back to my model. My model says, great, return that, or false back to my controller. So it kind of connects and talks to the two. We create this data. And so hopefully you guys are seeing sort of how the flow is going. Does this make sense or am I confusing anybody? Is this helping?
Yeah, it's good to see it this way.
Yeah. So then
It's
what we're
helping out
doing
a
is
lot
we're
of extra.
good. We're creating a data variable, right? Then we're saying user IDs for creating a new variable, and then, oh, where's it going now? Where's it gonna, what is line 63? Where's that gonna take me?
Users.
Yeah,
Model.
exactly. Back to my model, right? So it's gonna go back to my model. My model is gonna say, okay, great. Is there a method called save? Which we have one right here. Finds it and says, okay, let's generate this query. We create our query based off the data we were given. This data, which is this value. So we have that query. And then it says, okay, again, connect to MySQL DB, query DB. So then it takes that again back to MySQL Connect. MySQL will create a connection and a query. So it's going to go back to my DB. My DB is going to give back what? When we do an insert, which is what our query says, insert. It says, okay, I will do what you need, and I'm going to give you back the ID. So it says, okay, great. It then gives back a value to MySQL Connect. MySQL Connect is immediately going to take that value and give it back to my model, which my model takes that value immediately and gives it back to my controller. So then MySQL Connect back to model and then back to my controller. My controller says, okay, great. I've got a value. It's saved. Everything is good. Let's throw that in session. And then finally, I can redirect back to my front end, but I'm going to send them to dashboard and not the login page. So that's what's happening under the hood of just this method alone. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a lot of back and forth.
It is.
Well, it's very helpful to see it this way. Big
Yeah.
picture.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think this is the best way if you break it down in it. It is long and tedious to do, but this will be the best thing that can happen for you when you are problem solving, is thinking about it this way. And it sounds silly, but going line by line. Okay. When I get on line 52, it's calling get by email. Okay. So let's go to get by email. Okay. Get by email. I'm passing in data. Is this good? Okay. It is. So I know that once that happens, and I'm running get by email, I select my query. I'm able to get my data. I can test my data is good, or I can check, right? And say, yeah, the data that I'm passing, great. We know that that's good. My query looks fine. We're saying this, you know, if this isn't working, I might then say, well, what is it giving me? What is results? Right? And then we just kind of keep doing that. Okay, well, it's not this. Okay, maybe that worked great. Let's go back. Okay, so we go back to my model. Okay, or now we're running get by email, you know, and so kind of going back and forth and saying, okay, it's going from my controller to my model to MySQL Connect. It's getting a response from my database. It's giving it back to my model, which is giving it back to my controller. And what point is there a breakdown? At what step of this step by step thing? And you can see there's quite a bit. Like we make one request, and if everything goes well, we have, communication of one. I tried to make it like yellow and green for each one. It's like one, back, down. So two hits to my database. Between my model and my controller, we have 3 separate. So a request response, request response, request response. Between my model and my SQL Connect, we have 2. So, you can kind of sit and say there's a lot going on under the hood, but really this is the request response cycle. It just happens lightning fast, right? So hopefully that helped. Hopefully the visual and us just kind of walking through a method. You could do that for any of the methods. And I think that's a good practice just to be like, okay, because that's what I do every day whenever I'm coding. Is if there's an error, like, okay, what am I trying to say? What am I getting back? Let's go line by line. Where's it going? Where's it going here? Where's it going here? Okay, here's my error. So hopefully that visual helped a little bit and us actually saying, okay, we're gonna go from here to here. Cool, that's all I have. Are there any other questions?
No, but this was really helpful seeing it broken down like this.
Yeah, good.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, that was very helpful. Probably go back and watch the recordings 2 or 3 times just to really get it down back in my head.
Yeah, no,
Same.
and practicing, I think just if you write a method, and it doesn't even have to be here. It's if you're doing any sort of coding, like, okay, where's this going? Then what's happening? And then what's happening? Just kind of getting in that mindset is going to really help you in your coding career for sure. So, well, great guys. That's all I've got. I hope you have a wonderful night and a wonderful weekend. As a reminder, next week we are, I'll clear out all this. As a reminder, next week what we're doing is we are kind of doing a belt review. Oh shoot. We're doing a belt review. So if you've got anything that you need or you want to talk about, shoot me an email. Anything I can clarify. And if not, then what I'll probably do on the first day is walk through some different stuff. And then kind of, oh, we're not week 15, thank goodness. We're here. So next week will be a belt review. So we'll kind of walk through some stuff, maybe some queries or a mini to mini, or mini to mini is not till week 15, but walk through some stuff to kind of help prepare you guys on Monday, and then Wednesday we'll do an algo. But if there's, again, questions, also break down what to expect on the belt exam, how to prepare for it, because you guys haven't done maybe a full stack one. So happy to help in any way. And then that, I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend and a great rest of your night.
You too.
I just-
Likewise.
I was
You
just
too, you
wanting
too.
to, I was just wanting to let y'all know before y'all get off, if y'all want to work together, I'm gonna put my name on the chat here so that y'all can reach out to me on the Discord if y'all want
sounds
to
good.
work on the assignments. If I can open the chat.
Also, are you in our Discord, Chris?
Yes, yes, I am.
Okay, perfect. So you could, you're also in that too. So I think we should be able to find you that way, but yeah, awesome.
Yeah, I just put my my name up here on Discord just in case.
Perfect.
But
Awesome.
thank you
I
for
love
tonight. It was
collaboration.
really helpful. Yes, I
Yeah.
love it. I'm getting excited about it too. I've been working with other people from different cohorts, but
Yeah.
it'll be nice to work with someone here in this the one that I'm in right now. So,
Yeah. For
but
sure.
thank you. Good night.
Yeah. My pleasure. Take care.
All right.
Hey, y'all have a good night.
Good night,
Take
everyone.
care, everybody.
You too.